All right, well, hello everyone. This is the software engineering elicitation technique of laddering. Jacob Smith and I, Justin Sumida, are going to delve into what laddering is, its benefits and doubts, when to use it, and some sample data we collected through our work with this technique. So firstly, as anything else, we should introduce what laddering is. Laddering is an elicitation technique that focuses on the stakeholder needs and displays them in a hierarchy tree or sometimes in a ladder format. The reason it's called a ladder or the laddering technique is actually a twofold reason. First, questions are asked in a ladder format. The person asking the questions will start off at a sort of ground level and will continue to ask more advanced questions depending on the input of the stakeholder. This creates the important needs of the stakeholder, and as such can be displayed as a hierarchy in a ladder, which is the second reason, set or a tree, when the most important need sits at the root and the branches off from that need. There are actually various types of laddering, both hard and soft laddering. Soft laddering is a semi-structured interview identifying the stakeholders' attitudes and needs and repeats formal questions to fortify those needs as such. Hard laddering is when you start to put it to paper. And what I mean by that is that you start summarizing the attitudes and the values learned from the stakeholder in your soft laddering techniques. Though the two are very important to create an effective tree displaying the needs of the project from the stakeholders directly. So continuing on, there are a multitude of examples of laddering, and we will get into that later. For now, I'll just describe one. And one example is the idea of a psychologist to client behavior, where the psychologist is the one that's asking the questions and further guiding the discussion. And it's up to the client, however, to really drive the conversation. And it depends on how much he or she speaks that will bring them better to a better end goal, I guess. So there is a bilateral need for the psychologist and the client to give their best work in order to create the best discussion and outcomes possible. Laddering is also used to create a self-analysis of behaviors and of motivations to reflect on the needs and wants. The whole idea of laddering circles around self-analysis. And as anything else or any other elicitation technique that we will learn, there are its benefits and its downsides. Some of the pros of this technique are the following. Firstly, laddering allows close interaction with stakeholders. This proves to be very important in creating the best product possible. Close interaction is rewarded with good understanding and the needs of stakeholders. Additionally, laddering is a good way to organize the most important needs as described by the stakeholders. So long as the stakeholders are clearly explaining their needs, there really is no room for ambiguity in this technique. It's a very straightforward and direct way of understanding the needs of the stakeholders. And finally, laddering organizes needs in a hierarchical fashion, the most important being at the top, or the root in a tree setting. There are also a few cons as well. First, for laddering to be most effective, stakeholders must clearly understand the domain and clearly state it. Failure to do so will create ambiguity for those producing the product and can lead to a degraded version of the product that the stakeholder may not be pleased with. Both the stakeholders and the people working must understand the needs and attitudes of each other. Additionally, because laddering builds on each previous question, the number of questions generated can be hefty, and as such it can be difficult to keep track of it if the list is very long. Finally, maintaining the ladder is difficult when adding or removing requirements. This is because the stakeholders and those working must reevaluate the ladder to make sure it's still in its proper format.
All right, so now we've got a basic understanding of, kind of some of the benefits and the concept behind laddering. We'll talk about, what laddering looks like, and more specifically in the, soft laddering interviews. And, right here we've got three questions that are straight from an article we have linked at the end of this presentation. And, and these questions are more suited towards investigating, why someone chooses an existing product. But as we'll see, these questions can be easily modified to the context of developing a new product or software. This first question is like, why did you choose this product or service? Is much like is you're when you're asking this question, you're essentially asking their your interviewee like what the most important thing about that product is, and it's either like the best feature of that product or like how it's better than other products. And then you're going to want to follow up that question with by asking why is that, why whatever they answered that product with is either good or bad. And finally, probably the most important question is this last one, is asking why that good or bad feature, or like that presence of a good feature or absence of a bad one, is important to that person. And that really gets you to see and understand the values of that particular stakeholder, to see like where you should be focusing your efforts. And right here's an example of an interview I conducted when investigating what would be important in developing a hiking app. This first question, like, what would be an important feature of a hiking app? And the person responded, well, they want to have accurate data on trailheads, like the location of it and such, and the length, and why. And then that next question, like, why is it important for them to have that access? Is so they're not spending so much time figuring out where a trail is. They're spending time on that trail, and we can see like why it's important to them. For them, and that last question is they want to, like, when they're hiking, they want to be spending time hiking in nature. They don't want to be spending time stressed about other things. And it's really important to them. And in seeing that, we can see where to focus the efforts of that whole project. And then some tips about when you're conducting these interviews is it's important to teach the person you're interviewing about this process, because when you ask these sorts of questions, especially when you start asking about a lot of different types of features, it can get quite repetitive, and it's not really a natural conversation. The interviewee can like seem they're kind of childish questions, even though if you really understand it, there is a purpose behind those questions. So you should always make sure your interviewee understands the process, so they're not confused and bored by the process. And that pattern of those three types of questions, you can repeat that for all the major features of the product, and make sure to interview multiple stakeholders, because if you ask the same question to 10 different people, you're going to get 10 different answers. But if you're doing this repeatedly through different people, you can start to see where overall, like, what the most important things are. And then if certain things don't come up as often, that's this kind of stuff that you don't need to expend as much effort on. And then and it's important to know when we need to use laddering, and this kind of goes back to having an understanding of the pros and cons. And one of the greatest positive things about laddering is getting to have that close interaction with the stakeholder and understanding their values. Because if you have that interaction with them, if you understand them, then you can be able to develop a product that they'll be happy with, and it's the product that they actually need. And you need to make sure to not use laddering too much when you're dealing with an incredibly complex product, because if it's just not suited for requirements or projects with too many requirements, because again, these interviews can be long and kind of boring and repetitive if there is a lot of stuff. And but probably one of the best things about laddering is that you can see which features are the most important. If if you conduct the interview right, and if there's, you know, and if the stakeholder is engaged throughout the whole process.
I think that is it. All right, so thanks for watching our video, guys.